It's the 5th of April, 2020, and guess what's blooming? Trilliums. So we're going to bring some to you today from the forest. These are one of our earliest and most noticeable flowers in the woods here in our Sea region. So you can recognize and appreciate these trilliums as you walk past them. But what happens if you stop and spend a little time looking at them? I'm a photographer, not a biologist, so I'll be sharing my observations about trilliums, but there will be more questions than answers. If you know the answer to any of the questions that I raise, please contact us and we'll share that information with our viewers. One of the first things I notice about trilliums is how their structure is based on the number 3. 3 bright white petals grab my attention, and there are 3 smaller dark green sepals just below the petals. These sepals enclose the young flower bud, but show off their green 3ness as the flower opens up. These flowers have 3 big broad leaves. Here's one without a flower, but the 3 big leaves say that it's a trillium. Here's something with 3 leaves, but it doesn't look like a trillium. If you know what it is, please let us know. Here's an unusual trillium, the only one I've ever seen that has only 2 leaves. But amid all of this 3ness, the trilliums have just 1 stem each, though it can be rather tall, up to 12 inches. I typically see trilliums growing in places that don't have a lot of other plants on the ground this time of year. Please let us know if you know more about the location preferences of trilliums. If we look at the pollinating parts of the flower, we'll also see the number 3. The pistil in the center has 3 stigmas that receive pollen. 6 is a multiple of 3, and there are 6 stamens, which is where the pollen comes from. There are also 6 sides to the green structure in the center that will become the seed pod. Not all flowers have this kind of relationship with the number 3. For example, this flower has 5 petals. Here are more examples of local flowers that don't have that obvious 3ness. So let's take a look at how they go through their life cycle. Their leaves start popping out of the ground in early spring, around late March. Then the leaves spread on short stalks, and the flower bud starts forming around early April. Then the flower starts to open. As they get older, they look more like flowers than buds. Their pollinating parts start to pollinate. That powdery yellow pollen coming from the 6 stamens is intended for the 3 stigmas in the middle. But it gets scattered and can be seen on petals and on the leaves. How does the pollen get from one place to another? After a while, the pollination process slows down and the seed pod begins to dominate the flower. The flower starts to turn pink. The seed pod continues to grow and the petals get darker and darker pink. Then the flower petals go away, leaving just the 6-sided seed pod. Here's the seed pod that's opened up, displaying the seeds. But before that happens, while the flower is still pollinating, we see other evidences of animals. Here's one where the pollen is highlighting parts of a spider web in there. You can see a little spider in this next shot. And here's another spider. Here's a crab spider. Is it eating the pollen at all, or just moving it around accidentally? Do the spiders prey on other insects attracted to the flower? Or do the spiders also play an active role in the pollinating process? Here's a flying creature, and another flying creature. If you know what these are, let us know. Are they just resting there, or do they interact with the pollen? Here's one that looks like leftover parts of a creature after a spider got hold of it. And here's a bug that looks beetle-like. Here's a tiny little thing. And here's one even tinier, very, very tiny. All those little dots are grains of pollen on a leaf. And the insect seems to be only about 4 pollen grains wide. Here's one of those beetly things with pollen on it. And here's another of those beetly things crawling around. There's 2 of those beetly things. I wonder what they're up to. Does it have anything to do with pollen? A long, skinny spider. Even flies land on these flowers. Are they helping with the pollination? Lastly, here's a trillium with a feather that landed on it. Does anyone out there know what kind of feather this is? I hope you've enjoyed our quick tour of trilliums, and I hope you remember in future years that you can go searching for them in the woods around this time of year in the very early spring.